Hello, folks. We are at a crossroads. On one hand, we have cutting-edge science, peering back billions of years into space, hoping to decode the structure of the universe, model its birth, and predict its fate. On the other hand, we have timeless spiritual traditions asking deeper questions, not just what the universe is, but why we are here and what that means. But between these two worlds, science and spirit, lies a deep silence. Modern science avoids meaning, religion fears evidence, and in that gap, humanity drifts. We will bridge that divide right here. We will explore a cosmology that redefines gravity, space-time, and redshift, not as properties of a machine-like universe that manifests life, but as the visible surface of something far more profound, an evolving space-time continuum manifested and inhabited by life. And we will listen again, not to the mythicized Christ God of empire, but to the man, Jesus of Nazareth, a Christ, meaning an anointed one. This is the teacher who taught us that the kingdom of heaven is within us, in our midst. This is the prophet who taught that you, not the priests, not the emperors, are the doorway to the divine. What if these two truths, the quantum architecture of the universe and the teachings of Jesus, were not separate at all, but two expressions of the same cosmic revelation? We all know the world is somehow magical, but most, regardless of faith, also wonder in their heart of hearts, what and where is the Creator? Can science explain the Creator and who we are? Right now, you are living in the world of rock. But when we finish here, you will be living in a world of light, and you will know the meaning of life, and understand just how each of us is divine in origin and eternal in life. This is a world where time doesn't just pass, but drives events forward. Where life is not bound by stone, but manifests the universe it inhabits, like a snail its shell. I am Captain Cass Forrington. I am a cum laude graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York, and a published cosmologist and theologian. I am also managing editor of the Journal of Cosmology, who published my first paper, and, considering this subject matter, you should also know that I have an IQ of 141, meaning I am more intelligent than 99.7% of the world's population. In this video, we will listen not to the voices of dogma or empire, but to the living universe itself, and to a man named Jesus, who showed us that the kingdom of heaven is not above us, but within us. Let's begin with some background on me. As a baby, I was adopted into a Catholic Lutheran family, and my adoption papers required I be raised a Protestant. So I went to a Catholic school and Lutheran Sunday school in grades K through 5. In 6th grade, they moved me to public school and Episcopal Sunday school, where I was confirmed. My adoptive father was a shipbroker, like a real estate broker, but for ships, and we lived an upper-middle-class lifestyle on Bull Ditch Creek in Bayshore, New York. He was also a world-class sailor, competing in 3 World Championship Star-class ocean tournaments. He was also a co-founder and commodore of the local yacht club, and we also belonged to the country club. When I was 10, family problems began due to my adoptive mother's infidelity and the birth of her son. And my father subsequently died from alcohol abuse when I was 16. Before he died, I never gave religion much thought. I liked being in church, but frankly, it didn't make sense to me, and I didn't attend church once I was in high school. The only thing that made sense to me in all those years was when, in 2nd or 3rd grade, I asked a nun where God was, and she said, "Everywhere." I could see that clearly. When my father died, I became agnostic and, finally, bitterly atheistic during my years at the academy, and in my second year, I began investigating metaphysics. After graduation in 1972, I spent 27 years at sea, the last 14 as captain, crisscrossing the world's oceans, visiting over 50 countries on every coast of every continent except Antarctica. I could have made a voyage there too, but turned it down as the voyage is a miserable one. My journey has been more than one of charts and oceans. It has been a journey from doubt and derision to discovery. From seeing the world as cold and mechanical to realizing it is a warm world of light being evolved forward for us by a loving life. There were no offshore jobs on Union ships when I graduated the academy, so I took a job in Singapore and then Jakarta, Indonesia, on oil field service boats. In Jakarta, where I ran and lived aboard a crew boat, we expats frequented the Bamboo Restaurant, an open-air restaurant across the street from the marina in Tanjung Priok, where our boats were docked. One evening, a waiter, Tan, overheard me discussing the metaphysical with some other expats and told me he had a friend who could wash his hands in acid and asked me if I wanted to learn to do that. Of course, I said I did, and he went to his boss and got the rest of the night off, and we took off in a cab on a very long drive through Jakarta and up into the hills, where we stopped at a gas station where his friend was the attendant. When Tan told him what I wanted to do, he ran off and came back with a bottle of the acid. He poured it into an old 55-gallon drum top and picked up scraps of metal lying on the ground and threw them in. They fizzled and bubbled black goo and dissolved. His friend then put his hands in it and then showed me he was unharmed and asked me if I wanted to do that. Of course, I said yes. I should mention that throughout this experience, only Tan spoke English, and he was my interpreter. Also, although they called it acid, it might also have been a very strong base. I never heard a name for it and couldn't read the label, which was in Indonesian. So, Tan's friend went to his boss and got off work, and we all got into another cab and took off on another long drive farther up into the hills until we reached a small community of small, neat homes around midnight. We found that Tan's friend's teacher was out praying at someone's sickbed, so we had to wait a bit, and his wife gave us all a cup of tea while we waited. It is common in that part of the world for someone who made the Hajj to Mecca to be called the Haji, and I only knew the teacher as the Haji. I never heard his name, or, for that matter, anyone else's name, other than Tan's, throughout this experience. I should also note that, although Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country, if you ask a Saudi, he will tell you they are not Muslims. There is a lot of mysticism, like putting one's hands in acid, in Indonesian Islam that you don't find in the Mideast sects. When the Haji returned, Tan's friend told him I wanted to learn to safely put my hands in the acid. The Haji called in his young son, about age 7 or 8, and pulled out a large safety pin and straightened it out as best he could and sterilized it with a match. Then he had his son put out his arm, and he placed the pin against his forearm and pushed the needle through and wiggled it around. He pulled out the pin and wiped off the drop of blood on his son's arm and then pointed at me and said, "Now you." I had just seen the boy do it, and he never flinched and just took it as a matter of course, so I agreed and rolled up my sleeve. The Haji sterilized the needle again, then gently laid it against my skin and told me to just relax, and he pushed it through my forearm. The only pain I felt was the slight prick against my skin, though of course I could still feel it going through my muscle. All the while he was doing this, the Haji was looking at my eyes for any reaction, and as he saw none, he agreed to teach me. He had already instilled faith in me through his son, though I didn't think of that then. He told me to get up at 4 in the morning the following Wednesday and to fast all day, no food, water, sex, or cigarettes, and gave me a prayer in Arabic that I was to repeat 1,000 times, and then come back to his house at midnight. I did all of that except I had 3 cigarettes. That prayer later saved my life in Izmir, Turkey. A friend and I also went to a casino in the afternoon, and I won over $300 in 2 hours, winning at blackjack and hitting my roulette number 3 times in 20 minutes. That is equivalent to $3,000 today. I attribute that winning to the fasting. Simply put, when we deny ourselves what the Creator normally provides, it will try harder to give you something else you want. You will see this shortly in my quantum tales. When evening came, Ton and I grabbed a taxi and took the long drive into the hills, me craving a drink of water every time we passed a fountain. We got to the Haji's house at midnight and went in to find not just the Haji, but the Haji's students and the Haji's teacher, a much older man. There was a lot of interest because to them I was an infidel. In the harbor area, when we walked down the street, people would frequently spit and curse. I slept with a knife on either side of my bed, and our port captain had a pistol in his house. So, for me to do this was extremely unusual. The Haji's wife brought a tray with about 6 small cups of different flavored teas, and I was allowed a sip of each to break my fast. Then she brought out a bowl of white rice, and I was allowed 1 bite. Then a ceramic bowl, a spoon, and a bottle of the acid was brought out. The Haji put the acid in the bowl and dipped out a spoonful, and the spoon foamed blackly and dissolved. The Haji then put his hands in and back out. He then had his son do the same. Then he said to me, "Now you." He told me to take off my rings, and then I put my hands into what felt just like water. When I pulled them out, both the Haji and his teacher grabbed a hand and looked for injury, and there was a big hubbub amongst the students. The room was lit with small oil lamps on the walls, and the old man reached up and took down one of the glass chimneys, wrapped it in his handkerchief, and broke it on the table. He opened the handkerchief up, and both he and the Haji took a piece of glass and chewed it up, then spit it out and rinsed their mouths. The old man then pointed at me and said, "Now you." I got the distinct impression that he was not happy about me not being injured by the acid. I carefully picked out a piece that wasn't too curvy and began to chew it, and they told me not to swallow it. When I was done, I spit and rinsed, and they both dove into my mouth looking for blood and cuts, but finding none. I don't think the glass chewing part was very special, as I have seen other people do it as a party gag. One just has to chew carefully, keeping the glass between the teeth. Ton and I left shortly after, and as we were going out the door, the Haji told me I could do the acid thing any time now, without the fasting and prayer. But I could only show true seekers, not the just curious. I got back to the boat around 4 in the morning and slept until noon. I went to the Bamboo for lunch and found about 20 people waiting to see me put my hands in the acid, courtesy of Ton. Although the Haji's admonition about the curious immediately came to mind, Ton had done me a huge favor, and I didn't want him to lose face. So I agreed to do it. Ton ran off and got a bottle of the acid, a bowl and spoon. I took off my rings, poured the acid in the bowl, and dipped in the spoon, which bubbled away blackly. I then did my best to compose myself and put my hands into liquid fire. The pain was horrible, but I drew them back out and smiled at everyone and excused myself to rinse my hands in a fountain in the courtyard. The pain remained all day and night, and in the morning my hands were brown and I lost several layers of skin. Thus, even though I was still a bitter atheist, I learned the hard way that the acid thing was real, and I came to understand the power of faith. The night before I had faith. The Haji instilled it in me by having me do the fasting and praying, and then having his young son do it before me. He gave me the faith of a child through his Son. In the morning I had doubt, due to the Haji's comments. Consequently, to increase my faith, over the next 2 years I studied all the great faiths, wanting to know the simple truth the founders knew, not what is taught in the temples and churches. I read their books, the Bible, Torah, Quran, Bhagavad Gita, and Buddha's teachings, doing what they said, looking within, meditating, doing sensory deprivation, seeking the truth they said lay within us. In the realm of metaphysics, while still in Singapore in late 1972, I successfully demonstrated telepathy through distant viewing to a friend. He went into the bathroom, and I lay down on a bed and entered a self-hypnotic or meditative state. He drew a bell-shaped rotary phone, and I said I heard a bell ringing. He drew a cigarette with smoke spiraling up off the tip, and I said I saw a screw. It was these metaphysical or spiritual aspects I was subsequently looking for in the different faiths. Finally, after being disappointed and finding nothing within myself but me, one day I asked for something. I got it almost immediately in such a way that I knew I had gotten what I asked for. This got me started asking for things and getting them, and I finally had an epiphany and realized it was a world of light materializing around me. For me, as I interacted with it. I had already begun loving the Creator I found within me this way, but this now placed me in the quantum world, not the solid world of rock and Einstein's distorted space, but a continuously evolving holographic space-time continuum evolving forward for me personally. Heaven. Consequently, I saw quantum physics progressing well and logically, but saw real problems with astrophysics. The whole Big Bang, expanding universe, dark energy, and dark matter stuff that all grew out of the simple fact that, as we look out into space, which is looking back in time, things look redder the farther away they are. This is called the Hubble shift, after Edwin Hubble, the first astronomer to discover other galaxies in 1923, and the red shift in 1929. This simple shift in color upset what had, up until then, been a nice logical progression of science as we studied the universe. Even general relativity is logical. Up until then, everything was logical. Now it wasn't, because the only explanation they had for the redshift was that galaxies were accelerating away from us faster and faster the farther away they were, exceeding the speed of light. Since it is impossible to exceed the speed of light through space, the only explanation could be that the universe itself was expanding at that rate. What could cause that? They had no idea. Hence, they theorized a dark energy they called lambda. They still have no idea what it could be, but believe it must be there because of that redshift. Then they discovered that stars on the outer edges of large spiral galaxies do not obey Einstein's general relativity and are going too fast. Hence, their search for the dark matter causing that. We now have the lambda-cold dark matter Big Bang model of the last 100 years, which I knew had to be wrong because it was simply illogical and preposterous. Then, in 2015, I finally had an inspiration regarding gravity as being evolution's down time dilation gradients, rather than objects falling through space or moving through Einstein's warped space. So, I emailed Neil deGrasse Tyson and asked him about my inspiration, and he kindly replied and told me I should go back to school to prove it. I replied that that was highly unlikely at the age of 65. So, I went back to school. It was my only way forward, and when I get going on something, I am extremely persistent in my pursuit. It cost me nothing, as I wasn't looking for degrees, just knowledge. And I did it all online. After refreshing my calculus, I studied quantum physics using MIT's OpenCourseWare and other resources. And then tensor calculus, so I could read Einstein in the original to see how my idea related to general relativity. It then took me 3 years to prove the pesky red Hubble shift was not due to objects accelerating away from us in space, but rather due to a 2.26th of a billionth of a second per second acceleration in the rate of time within living things. The simple proof of this acceleration was in front of us all the time in the plants that grow upward against gravity. It is impossible to move upward against gravity without acceleration. This derivation got my first paper published, and I subsequently became managing editor of the Journal of Cosmology, who had published me. I had eliminated the accelerating expansion of the universe and the need for the mysterious dark energy scientists have fruitlessly been seeking for nearly 100 years. When that paper got published, I knew the planet's velocities were due to their faster rates of time relative to the Sun, but couldn't find the math to prove it until January of 2021. When I found that math, my whole model became crystal clear. Space-time is a single thing with two aspects: space and time. Time is a force, and space has inertia. So time evolves space forward by dragging it in the forward direction of time at the speed of light. Put quite simply, time is dragging space forward, and that force in time is gravity. When there is a spatial density, let's say the Earth, it is harder for time to evolve that space forward, and time appears to go more slowly. We call that time dilation. As the universe is a continuum, it must all evolve forward at the same rate, or it would keep stretching out as time passed. And the first formula I derived, velocity equals the speed of light, c, times the square root of the difference in the rate of time, or dRt, at any point in space, prove that all gravitationally induced velocities are merely compensation for the slower rates of time and masses, so they keep up with the rest of the evolving continuum. The difference in the rate of time is relative to the invariant 1 second per second rate of the universe as a whole, which all of us experience within ourselves. Only the difference in the rate of time determines the velocity at that point in space. And if we divide that formula by the square root of 3, we get the velocities of the stars at the outer edges of large spiral galaxies that have had scientists looking for their elusive, cold, dark matter. Thus, we have now eliminated dark energy and cold, dark matter completely, and the LCDM model is just dead. I sent out those first two velocity formulas to a list of 384 astrophysicists in 33 universities, and 128 downloaded the paper. I then began revising my original paper to include the new velocity insights and had over 700 astrophysicist downloads of the preprints up until the final version replaced the original paper in the Journal of Cosmology in November 2021. Over time, it had also become clear to me that our satellites were not finding what was expected. This culminated in 2024 with the James Webb Space Telescope finding galaxies where there is supposed to be nothing, which I predicted in my first paper in 2019. This discovery was the final nail in the LCDM model's coffin. My mailing list expanded to 50 universities as I came out with more papers, and I have now been told that most of the PhD physics students at Princeton and the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen now know of my model and work, meaning this is probably also true for the other universities. Now, when we substitute the velocity term, v, in our other formulas with c times the square root of the dRt, we find that the dRt now becomes its own element in the formulas, not only demonstrating its importance in all physical processes, but also allowing us to solve for the dRt. This should now allow us to develop gravity drives so we can evolve ourselves through the continuum, like our alien visitors do, by manipulating the dRt instead of using external force to shift our mass through it. Additionally, when we replace the velocity element in any formula with c times the square root of the dRt, we then get the formula in terms of mc and mc squared. Like Einstein's famous energy formula, E equals mc squared. Velocity disappears from the formulas. The dRt replaces it as the energy source. In my second and third papers, Time Dilation Cosmology and Time Dilation Cosmology 2, I make that substitution in our existing physics formulas and provide solutions to them to prove they work. I also prove that black holes are not supermassive bodies, but rather space-time vortexes. If they were supermasses, where time appeared to stop, their velocities would have to be huge to compensate for the slower rates of time, which we just don't see. Also, with such a huge mass slowing time so much, we could never see such huge masses build up, as objects approaching them would move ever more slowly and appear to stop long before they reached the surface of the mass. This allowed me to move on to my fourth paper, The Unified Field, where I was finally able to show how gravity is involved in electromagnetism, something Einstein tried, and failed, to do his entire life after he completed general relativity. My fifth paper, Time Dilation Cosmology 3, was merely a mathematical proof of the square root of 3 and square root of 2 accelerations in time and space that appeared in my original velocity derivations. My sixth paper, Time Dilation Cosmology 4, had to be peer-reviewed by a theologian instead of a physicist, because in it I demonstrate how we are all one life, the Creator, and place the universe in the mind of the Creator. Then, in my seventh paper, Time Dilation Cosmology 5, I demonstrate how, since the universe is in the mind of the Creator, and the Creator is the very life within us, then the universe is also within us. We, meaning all living things, not just people, are what the Creator is doing to escape its eternal loneliness and pass its eternity. It is our very life and our eternal soul, passing itself along from life form to life form throughout eternity. We are all one in it, and we are all its children. Our spirit is its spirit, which is why we hate boredom and fear loneliness. With the TDC 4 and 5 papers, I also began emailing 1,860 theologians in the top 72 English-speaking divinity schools, and, besides the normal number of physicists who follow my papers, 50%, approximately 900, of the theologians downloaded those two papers when they came out, and 80%, approximately 1,400 of the theologians, downloaded a preprint referenced in TDC 4 that explains the biblical miracles in terms of the natural order of events. I'll explain a few of them here shortly. Now let me place the universe within us. The speed of light is a constant everywhere, and each of us experiences a constant rate of 1 second per second, no matter where we are. In a gravity field, we can perceive another's clock as going slower or faster than our own. But each of us personally experiences the same invariant 1 second per second rate as the universal continuum as a whole. That is Einstein's special relativity. Because of that tiny acceleration within us that accounts for Hubble's redshift, we are each always the fastest rate of time around. We are surrounded by slower time. Not only that, but because of that acceleration, time appears to go slower the farther away from us we look. This is because the acceleration is cumulative over time, because we are all the eternal one life, and the acceleration effects are passed on from life form to life form. Older time always appears to be slower the older it is. Now this is the fun part. Because the speed of light is constant, and space-time is a single thing, in order to maintain the speed of light, if the rate of time appears to increase, space has to appear to contract. If the rate decreases, space has to appear to expand. This means the farther away we look, as time appears to grow slower, the more expansive space must appear to be in all directions. At the cosmological horizon, where time appears to stop, space has to become perceptually infinite. This is all dependent on you, on your own personal perception. No matter where you are, you will always see the same sized universe surrounding you, and you will always be at the center of your own universe. This perceptual expansion is not energetic. It is totally passive and relies solely on your perspective. If you move towards the cosmological horizon, not only will it recede and more galaxies come into view, like the James Webb Space Telescope found, but the galaxies you see behind you will slip over the cosmological horizon and disappear. Space will also continue to contract around you as you move forward down the shifting time dilation gradient. This means all distances are illusions. They are completely dependent on your perceptions of different rates of time. The universe is unfolding from within you. Everything we see occurred in the past because light takes time to reach us. Where time runs more slowly at the point of emission, the interval between emission and observation is stretched when measured by a faster clock. But where time itself runs more slowly, events unfold more slowly as well. When those signals reach an observer whose time runs faster, the accumulated time rate difference stretches the observed interval. And that stretching is what we interpret as distance in space. Even though everything is actually due to perceptions within us, we experience it as an external world. The TDC model explains how the physics in that apparently outside world works. Let's now examine that. To begin with, what is this place? Where are we, and what the dickens are we doing here? What is it made of? What are we made of? Well, it is a holographic world of light, and it is evolving forward at the speed of light. It is not Einstein's world of time and distorted space and separate masses moving through that space. It is the holographic space-time continuum. It has no separate parts and no voids, and all masses are energy densities within the continuum, not separate bodies. In fact, there is no such thing as a solid particle. Nothing is solid. All the subatomic particles are energy events in space-time that are evolving forward in the forward direction of time. However, we still refer to such events as particles for simplicity's sake. All masses, including our bodies, are made up primarily of electrons and quarks. In an atom, the relative distances between particles is huge, and we are mostly empty space. The universe is 99.99999999999 or some such empty space. Most of what we are is water, and water has just a static connection between molecules, which gives us our fluidity. We use our will to control mass. We will our arm to move, and it moves. We will our legs to move, and we shift our position in the continuum. For masses outside our bodies, we will our bodies to manipulate them for us. That is all mind over matter. So how do we do that? Who knows? It is our divine power. The split screen experiment is a great example of this lack of solidity and fluid nature. If we put up a screen with two slits in it and place another screen behind it, when we fire an electron midway between the two slits, the electron goes through both slits simultaneously, and we see a wave interference pattern on the rear screen, showing the electron went through the slits as a wave, and on the other side of the screen we see two waves, one from each slit, that interfere with each other, leaving the interference pattern on the rear screen. But if we put a camera on one of the slits to film what is happening there, the electron only goes through that slit and leaves just a dot, like a particle would, on the rear screen. So we affect the evolution of those events just by observing them. Indeed, what you see behind me is not even part of my universe until I look at it. Until then, it exists in the quantum state of only possibilities. And those possibilities have to be logical possibilities because the universe is a logical construct. However, it is important to note that because we are divine in origin, the effects of faith are also logical possibilities. Hence my hands in acid story. When I turn around and look at it, it collapses into the logical possibility I see, and that becomes my reality. The reason this happens when we observe it is because the subatomic events making up the masses are evolving forward at nearly the speed of light. And when we observe something moving at the speed of light, time appears to stop for it. If a rocket accelerated away from us to the speed of light, we would see time stop at the rocket, and it would appear frozen in space. This is why we can look out into space back in time 13.9 billion years to the cosmological horizon. Photons, light, travel at the speed of light, so we see instants frozen in time. Thus, the events of our lives only exist as logical possibilities until we participate in events by observing them. But it is much more than that. Space-time comes from the awareness of being here, now, space and time. There is one such awareness. If there were no universe, it would exist eternally alone in a dark void, just being aware of itself. I am. I am. I am. This is a horrible state of being. It is not heaven, it is hell. Fortunately, it perceives time accelerating at the square root of 3, putting stress on space, manifesting the vacuum zero-point energy, VZPE, and inducing a square root of 2 acceleration in space. The stress on space manifests the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMBR, the primary light of the universe, and from that light, through simple time dilation, it can manifest worlds it can incarnate itself into, to escape its eternal loneliness and pass its eternity. That is our divine origin, our one life. In TDC4, I use the example of an amoeba as a simple one-celled life form. In it, we see one life in one life form. When it replicates itself, it reproduces its genetic code and divides itself in 2. We now see 2 life forms, but still only the one life. Likewise, both the sperm and ovum are alive, but when the sperm penetrates the ovum and completes the genetic map for a new life form, it is still only the one life we see inhabiting the new life form. The oldest clonal organism on Earth, the Wollemi pines, is 60 million years old. The same life flowing through identical clones of the original life form. Life did not and does not begin. Life only comes from life, and it flows from life form to life form throughout eternity. All of us, all living beings, not just people, are merely more of us coming forth from within us, and we are all just different points of view for the one life. As I will explain shortly, this accounts for non-locality and quantum entanglement in physics and the distant viewing and telepathy I mentioned earlier. Just below the surface, we are all one. If we go back 2,000 years, at 4 generations per century, we have 2 to the 80th ancestors, 1.2 septillion people, which is far, far more than all the people who have ever lived. This is because our bloodlines crisscross over and over again, so we are all genetically related. All people of European descent are 4th to 6th cousins, and worldwide we are all 70th to 100th cousins. Because the most important other to one eternally alone is a loving other, the one life, the Creator, makes us male and female, and through our loving we participate in the creation by bringing forth more loving others in the form of our children. In quantum physics, we know we influence the evolution of events by simply observing them. But because we are the Creator's children, events are also actually evolving around each of us for us each instant, as the one life evolves each of our individual universes forward. I will demonstrate this shortly in my quantum tales. Distant viewing is a telepathic communication where one person sees what another is looking at. As I noted earlier, I have done it myself. We know this is real, and the CIA has used it. The images are never 100% the same, but the similarity is proof enough of what is occurring. If we create two particles together, let's say two electrons, they are entangled, and if we shoot them off in opposite directions out into space, no matter how far apart they are or how much time has passed, what affects one will immediately affect the other. If we have two observers, Alice and Bob, and Alice uses an electric field to flip her electron, Bob will see his flip at the same instant. The two particles act as one because they are one in the quantum superposition state of possibilities. For this experiment to work, which it does, Alice and Bob must also be one in the superposition state, just different points of view for the same observer. We call this non-locality, one of the biggest mysteries in physics that TDC also explains. The emergence of the structures of the universe are the consequences of time dilation, manifesting through awareness itself. This includes the biological structures, the life forms. Life only comes from life, and life forms require the detritus of other life forms to build and maintain their own. We see that detritus throughout the universe in the form of oil, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, complex organic molecules that are found on galactic dust, like the dust that obscures parts of the Milky Way, on comets, meteorites, and throughout the interstellar medium. When astronauts take a walk in space, their spacesuits stink of it when they go back inside. Pluto has a huge patch of it. And we see it in the light signatures of the farthest galaxies detected by the James Webb Space Telescope. Glycine, a basic amino acid within life forms, has been detected in the tail of a comet. These aren't accidents. They're signatures of life as a universal embedded phenomenon, seeded not randomly, but systematically. This is more than the panspermia of comets sprinkling bacteria and fungi from destroyed oil-rich worlds into the oceans and onto the land masses of newly formed habitable planets to begin the evolution of life forms using the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons found everywhere. It's deeper. It's not that life spreads across space, it's that life forms emerge everywhere it is habitable. Life is not a passenger in the universe. It is the driver. And it is not Darwin's accidental evolution. The very life within realizes a change can be beneficial, as for black to white for polar bears, and makes the genetic change. It is a willful evolution. You are not one among many lives. You are a local expression of the one life, experiencing itself from this particular point in time. In the TDC model, instead of Einstein's extremely complex tensors in a fixed, distorted space, all we need is two evolutionary velocities in an evolving holographic space-time continuum. One in the fundamental direction of evolution, or FDE, which is the forward direction of time, and the other, the gravitational direction of evolution, or GDE, down the time dilation gradient, the gravitational forward direction of time. We can easily discern the GDE just by dropping something. Events evolve down time dilation gradients, and we call it falling. As I am speaking, we are all evolving forward in the FDE at the speed of light. We can see that direction in the motion of objects. In which direction are they evolving forward? That is the forward direction of time at that point. In an orbit, it is the tangent to the orbit at any point. As I noted earlier, in the TDC model, I have proven that all gravitationally induced velocities are directly related to the difference in the rate of time at any particular point. This is because, in a continuum, you can't have one part evolving forward at a different rate than the rest. Everything must evolve forward at the speed of light, so time is dragging the spatial densities forward, giving them a velocity. Conversely, when we generate the velocity through the application of force, like in a rocket, we see the same time dilation appear, But now it is the time dilation compensating for the velocity of the rocket, so it can't get ahead of the continuum either. The speed of light is the inviolate rate of evolution of the continuum. The GDE is perpendicular to the FDE and slowly bends the FDE into an orbit. At the same time, since planets have faster rates of time than their stars, and moons their planets, and they cannot evolve ahead of the more massive body in the continuum, they appear to revolve around it, and the distance traveled is equal to the distance it would otherwise have moved ahead due to its faster rate of time. Thus, we see a beautiful symmetry in time and space. The two velocities caused by the differences in the rate of time manifest the orbital distance necessary to account for the faster rate of time. As noted earlier, this should give us the ability to create gravity drives. I came up with two methods that AI agrees would work, if only we could produce 10 to the 27th joules of electricity. As our visitors use gravity drives in large and small craft, I am thinking it might only be able to be done at the quantum level and probably requires little energy. The universe is manifested as per the TDC model, with the gravitational direction of evolution down the time dilation gradient, translating the energy of time into kinetic energy. When that energy impedes at the focus of a spherical dilation pit, or gravity well, it is translated into mechanical energy in the form of pressure, which translates into heat energy and then thermonuclear energy, manifesting stars and all the elements of the universe. The velocity formulas are what have gotten the TDC model so much attention. Math doesn't lie, and it all works, even where general relativity doesn't. Not a single physicist has pointed out an error in the model after thousands of downloads. However, while the TDC model is the basis of the physics we observe on the large scale, on the personal scale, the universe is still manifesting around each of us, for each of us in our own universe. And this brings us to the quantum tales. We have now also gotten to a place where we can define the Christian Trinity clearly. We already established the parent-child relationship. Now we merely need to note that when we ask the Creator for something, or just speak to it, we normally indulge our Holy Spirit of love and reverence. Thus, it is certainly not a Holy Ghost or a separate being descending on us or into us. It is just us indulging our innate Holy Spirit, just as we indulge our humorous spirit, our loving spirit, our angry spirit, our dramatic spirit. Creator, Child, and Holy Spirit, three aspects of one divine being. I would also note that in my studies of the faiths, it was often noted that to know the Creator, we need merely know ourselves. This is because the life within is the life of the Creator, and whatever we feel, it too feels. Our very feelings are its feelings. It is important to note that faith cannot be tested. Testing what these stories reveal is doomed to failure, because testing means doubting, and faith is the absence of doubt. When you ask and just let it be, and move on with what you are doing, as in this first quantum tale about the red marble. I established and owned the now world-famous Sea Glass Museum in Fort Bragg, California, the town with the highest concentration of sea glass in the world. For those who don't know, sea glass is found on beaches everywhere because all water communities used to have water dump sites and still do in the Third World, where they lack the funds and technology for landfills. The glass in those dumps gets broken and tumbled by the sea, shaping beautiful pieces of gem-quality glass with a fine patina that comes from the glass dissolving in the salt water. I would ocean kayak to my favorite collecting site, which was the first of 3 ocean dump sites in Fort Bragg. And I landed at the beach one day and found 2 marbles right next to each other, right next to my kayak. They were just plain, colorless, well-frosted marbles. But marbles are rarer than reds, which are 1 in 5,000 pieces. And to find 2 right next to each other is remarkable. So I said, Lord, The Creator is neither male nor female, and has no possible name. But this is how I address it. Thank you. I sure would like to find a red marble, though. I've got a blue one, and I thank you, but I sure would like to find a red one. I put that thought aside and went back picking, and after about 2 hours, I was tired, and it was time to go tidewise. But there was just a little more beach to cover, so I decided to just make a quick pass and see if I could spot anything big just lying on top. Normally I would walk very slowly, looking for the gems peeking out amongst all the other glass. Just before I got to the end, there was this huge red marble, a Christensen Bloody, made between 1906 and 1917. Christensen was the first to machine-produce marbles. It is 15/16 of an inch in diameter. It is a beautiful blood red with a white swirl that forms a wave. It is the only marble that large I found in my collecting. I rolled my eyes up and exclaimed, "Lord, Lord, Lord, dear Lord." Then, when I bent down to pick up the marble, there were also 2 pieces of jewelry-quality red glass, one on either side of the marble. I went, "Oh, Lord, dear Lord, a bunch more." The 2 red pieces is how I see the Creator speaking to me. To me, they were the Creator saying the marble was not just a coincidence, that I asked for red and got red. With reds being 1 in 5,000 pieces, the odds of finding all 3 together are just too vast for it to be otherwise. I think it gave me these 3 so I could tell this tale, which I do frequently, and even have it in my science papers and on my websites. I would also note that I had only pictured a small, regular-sized red marble when I asked. I find the Creator always gives us a much better version of what we ask for than what we imagined. I believe this is because the Creator has a by far greater imagination than we do and loves us so dearly. The point here is that neither the marble nor even that section of beach it lay upon existed for me until I observed them, and all the superposition possibilities collapsed into my reality, which was partly determined by my wishes, faith, and expectations. This eliminates the possibility of the formulation of an absolute quantum determination. We can never positively predict what will happen in the next instant. The marble is also nearly pristine. How did it get there? Beach marbles are normally of the regular size because the vast majority came from painters who used them in their paint cans to help stir the paint. Large marbles are not suited to that. The point is, it doesn't really matter. It materialized in my universe for me because there are logical reasons it could. There could be a reason why it ended up in the dump, and the wave action that day might have brought it to the top before I got to that end of the beach that day. All that really mattered in my world was that there were logical reasons it could be there. Ask and you shall receive. This next tale is about a little girl in red sea glass. One day there was a girl about age 8 or 9 on the beach with her parents, who had trespassed on the headlands to get there. She was only looking for reds, which, remember, are only 1 in 5,000 pieces. In 2 hours she found 9 reds, whereas I, who was looking for whatever stood out, would find a red every 3 or 4 months. At one point she ran up to me and started talking to me, and as we were finishing up, she looked down and picked up a beautiful red from right between my feet, where I was looking when she ran up to me. Hence, the red materialized for her, who was looking for it, in her universe, but not for me in my universe until she found it and showed it to me. Children tend to find what they are looking for because they believe they can. Seek and you shall find. This next tale is about a stranger's search. I began my business by selling my jewelry on the headlands above the glass beaches. One day a man came down and asked me where to look. I told him there was a slag pile in the cove next to me, and that because it replenished the beach, he might find something rare like a red. He came back in about 15 minutes with a beautiful red and asked me where else he could look. Knowing what was happening and laughing to myself, I told him he could go to the beach behind me and that there was much more glass there, and maybe he could find something even rarer, like a great purple. He came back in about 20 minutes with a beautiful grape purple. Grape purples are one of the rarest colors, being just 1 in 10,000 pieces, if that. I found only 4 in 10 years of collecting. He simply had faith in what I told him, as would a little child. Sound familiar? Seek and you shall find. Have the faith of a child. Faith the size of a grain of mustard seed is sufficient. The next tale is about 2 bullets. One day a man came in my museum, and it came out in our conversation that he was a Southerner who liked to hunt. He also talked about how important the Second Amendment to the Constitution was to him. Later in the day, he came back in. He had gone down to the beach and had found 2 unspent bullets in the tide pools, just 10 feet apart, and he donated them to the museum. One was a .22 and the other a .30-06 caliber. In my 10 years of collecting, I only noticed a few spent cartridges, all .22 caliber. I never saw a live round. To each his own. This story is one of my favorites and is about caramel corn. My sea glass museum is in a large building with other businesses and restaurants. Across the hall there was a video rental store that sold movie snacks, and one day I noticed they sold caramel corn. When I got back to the museum, I had a strong craving for the caramel corn, which I hadn't had in decades, but resisted the strong urge several times, since I knew if I got started on caramel corn, I would get into it, and in a month I would have to go on a diet to lose the 5 pounds I gained eating the caramel corn. I bring fruit for snacks each day, and when I am done with it, I throw away the rind or whatever is left in the trash can outside what was then the video store and is now a video game store, as it is emptied daily, unlike the trash can in my museum. Later that day, I ate my fruit and walked over to throw away the residue, and in the trash can, right on top, was an unopened bag of caramel corn. Of course, I took the corn and got into it for a month, and when I finally stopped eating it, I had to go on a diet for a month to lose the 5 pounds I gained eating it. Thus, we do not have to directly ask for something. The Creator also responds just to desire, and, in this case, with a great sense of humor. There is also a table and chairs by the trash can, but it was in the trash can, not on the table. However, when I told this story to a couple one day, the man said, "No, it is not just the sense of humor. If it was on the table, you wouldn't have taken it, because you would have thought it might belong to someone." Of course, he was right. Did that bag of caramel corn just materialize there for me? In the quantum sense, yes, but if we had a video camera on the trash can and we searched the video, we would find it came there through the natural course of events. Like someone overweight who bought the caramel corn in the video store, but had second thoughts about it on the way out and simply threw it away. That is, of course, just a logical possibility, as improbable as it is as a mere coincidence. However, if we had no way to go back and look, it would be the same as if it just materialized there, as our worlds are always materializing around us for us out of what are just the logical possibilities. And all that is needed is the logical possibility it could occur, not that that possibility actually occurred. For instance, I sell landscaping glass to the tourists so they can leave some glass when they take some from our beaches, or just to help replenishment. As I write this, I estimate over 2 million pieces have gone down to the beaches this way. Most of that disappears quickly, as it is pretty, but some of it gets buried in the sand and will stay hidden long enough to become gemstone quality. So it is a logical possibility that people will find such gems. Because no one has kept count of the pieces put there or removed, it will remain a logical possibility forever, even if all the original pieces were removed, because that will always remain an unknown. All that is required is the logical possibility. As in the preprint of the paper Demystifying the Bible, referenced in my Time Dilation Cosmology 4 paper, miracles will always appear to have occurred in the natural course of events when scrutinized. However, because of our divine origin, the effects of faith are logical possibilities that influence the course of those natural events. This effect due to scrutinization is similar to what we see in the dual slit phenomenon with the electron. Is the electron a wave or a particle? It is neither. It is just an electron, and how we scrutinize it affects what we see it as. The quantum tales are all stories of synchronicities, coincidences that are too coincidental to be mere coincidence. The following tales are also tales of synchronicities, though not with the obvious seeking and asking aspects in the previous tales. This next story is also one of my favorites. A woman came into my museum a few years after I began it and brought in a shot glass full of sea glass from Maui's Glass Beach to donate to the museum, and we had a nice conversation about synchronicities. Several years later, she came back in and told me the following story. She had been looking for sea glass on a beach in Southern California, and she found a piece of pottery that had her father's complete birth date on it, day, month, and year. She has a friend who collects antique pottery and sent it to her to see if she could identify it, and she could. It came from a town in Pennsylvania that both her father and grandfather had lived in. It was part of the bottom of a mustache mug that was made for a specific regiment in the Army that both her father and grandfather had served in. The kicker was that her grandfather had worked in the factory that made it. She had it put in a gold bezel so she can wear it as a necklace. That tale makes the hair stand up on people's arms and necks and gives them goosebumps. When I first began my sea glass jewelry business, I used to sell on the trail to our glass beaches where I collected my sea glass. I was sitting there the second week I began selling in June 2005, reading the Da Vinci Code to pass my time. I had just read about a 5-petaled rose, pictured with 3 leaves in the book. It is the major symbol in the book because it represents the Holy Grail, which is what the book is about. What I had read was, the rose is synonymous with the Grail. And I was sitting there thinking about that when a woman who was coming back up off the beach asked me if it was usual to find rose-colored glass. I said, no, rose is very rare. I don't even have any. It is about 1 in 3,000 pieces, and I had only been collecting for a couple of weeks. She said, well, I found a piece, and put her hand in her pocket. I expected her to pull out a small pebble. Instead, she handed me one of the most beautiful pieces of beach glass I had seen come off the beach at that point. I looked at it and was totally in awe when I saw it had a perfect 5-petaled rose on it, complete with 3 leaves. The very same rose I was reading about in the book when she walked up. When I showed her what I had just read and the picture in the book, she gave me the piece of sea glass. I tried to turn it down, but she insisted. The kicker to this tale is that she was from Santa Rosa, or St. Rose, California. I put this story up online, and a woman named Rachel from New Brunswick, Canada, sent me a photo of a piece she found with the same pattern, and she had identified the pattern online. It was made by Jennifer Glass between 1932 and 34, and the pattern name is Adam, which means man. She later flew out to visit our beaches and the museum and gave me a few pieces from New Brunswick to add to the display. This is a different tale in that it is about what was not found. In the 1970s, I was the second officer on a ship going to the Far East. The ship was running a direct Great Circle, the shortest route, between San Francisco and southern Japan. The second officer is the ship's navigator and stands the 4 to 8 watch in the morning and evening so we can get star fixes during twilight when both the stars and horizon are visible. In those days, the star fixes were the most accurate positions we got on the open ocean. On the morning we were to make landfall, after a 22-day passage, the sky was crystal clear with no moon, and the stars were all shining brightly, allowing me to shoot 6 stars that plotted as a perfect pinwheel on the chart. A perfect fix. At 8 a.m., I got off watch and told the captain we would be making landfall at 10 a.m. At noon, I was called to the bridge, and the captain asked me where Japan was. He said I told him we would see it at 10, and now it was noon, and there was still no Japan there. Celestial navigation was done longhand, in a notebook, and the captain checked my fix, and everything was as it should be, including average speed for the day's run, fuel consumption in barrels per mile, and the amount of propeller slip, which are important figures for the chief engineer. Everything worked out perfectly, except Japan wasn't there until 2 more hours, 2 p.m. It was 60 miles further than it was supposed to be. I have asked cartographers if perhaps the hills and valleys in the ocean might account for it, and they said that would only be a mile or so. No answer was found. Years later, I was captain of another ship, and it was on a great circle from San Francisco to Yokohama, Japan, the same route. 2 days from Yokohama, I called in my second officer and asked him to work a great circle backwards from Yokohama to our present position. By then, this was done by a navigation computer in just a few minutes. After about an hour, the second officer came down and nervously started apologizing for his error, which he couldn't figure out, and said that there was an additional 60 miles to go, and I stopped him and told him it wasn't his fault and explained my own experience. It is rare that ships cross the entire Pacific on a great circle because other stops or weather can require changes, and I only did it on those 2 voyages. It does not occur on aircraft, just ships and, possibly, just those 2 ships on those 2 voyages. But I prefer to think not, and that, if one were to sail a great circle from San Francisco to Japan today, that Japan would not be there. This is a perfect example of how the universe is not always what it appears to be. I am not sure of what logical quantum possibility could allow for this, but there must be one, as all events must be the result of logical possibilities, and navigation is too precise and continuous from moment to moment to allow it to have been a navigational error. These tales are but a few I can tell, because this is the world of light I have lived in for over 50 years. Now I want to explain a few biblical miracles to you because they too must actually have occurred in the natural order of events due to logical possibilities. Let's begin with Moses on Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai. When Moses fled Egypt after killing the Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave, he went to Midian. While tending sheep, he happened on Mount Sinai. We know Sinai was a volcano because it explains the pillar of smoke and fire the Hebrews followed during their exodus. The pillars didn't lead them. Moses was leading the Hebrews towards them. Smoke in the day, fire at night. Volcanoes often have hallucinogenic gases, and St. Elmo's fire. St. Elmo's fire appears as a bluish light on the rigging of ships and other places, like the branches of plants, due to ionization. It appears flame-like, so Moses was most likely hallucinating on the gases while talking to the Creator in a burning bush that wasn't consumed by the flame. His staff turning into a snake on the ground is a common type of hallucination of people who take LSD and other hallucinogens. This is not to say he wasn't talking to the Creator. If one is talking to the Creator, one is talking to the Creator, period. I am not placing doubt on his inspiration, just the nature of the miracles. As I note in my biblical paper, it is often the timing of the events that is miraculous, as with the plagues of Egypt. After Moses returned to Egypt to free the Hebrews, there was a red tide, like we see off the coast of Florida from time to time. A paper by the USA National Institutes of Health notes how such a red tide produces nearly all the 10 plagues. Fish died from lack of oxygen, and they rotted, causing swarms of pests to flourish. Amphibians, like frogs, were forced onto the land, and the pests eating the rotten fish carried pestilence to the cattle and finally to the homes of the people. What saves the Hebrews was the lamb's blood they put on their door frames, which the pests fed on instead of the people inside. Locusts getting blown into the Nile area out of the desert is also something that happens from time to time. Again, the timing was good for Moses, as it was at the Sea of Reeds, where the wind blew back the water, allowing the Hebrews to cross on a mat of reeds, and then, when the wind stopped and the water returned and the reeds stood up again, Pharaoh's troops were engulfed and mired in muck. I should note that modern scholars agree that Moses did not cross the Red Sea, which was much too far to travel before Pharaoh caught up with him, but rather the Sea of Reeds, which modern-day Egyptians will tell you is where the Great Bitter Lake along the Suez Canal is today. All four Gospels have the story of how Jesus miraculously fed 5,000 people with just a few loaves and fishes. This was not a miracle. In those days, when people went out to hear a preacher, they could not buy a cold beer and a chili dog when they got hungry. So some people would bring their own food and drink. When those who did not bring food got hungry and started to leave, a disciple pointed this out and suggested Jesus call it a day. Instead, Jesus told him to bring the loaves and fishes they had brought for themselves, and he broke them into pieces in a basket and told him to pass it around. The disciple protested, saying they would be left with nothing for themselves, and Jesus told him not to worry. As the basket made its way around, people simply followed Jesus' example of sharing and added food to the basket, and by the time it made its way around, there were now several baskets of food. It was a simple lesson in sharing and of how, if we share, there is enough for all and lots left over. The paper explaining all the biblical miracles has not been refined and submitted or reviewed for publication, but you can find it online at capcast.com/bible.pdf. This new TDC One Life model of the universe is going to force all the faiths to make alterations in their doctrines. We are now no longer talking of this God or that God. We are speaking only of the one life, the Creator, our divine, eternal part, the one life passing eternity within us all. The Creator obviously cherishes diversity, and I do not want to replace or eliminate any culture or religion. I am only working to achieve a slight change in perspective within them. All the religions share mostly common values and moral codes, but all the religions have flaws, especially from this new perspective. If we can correct those flaws, we can eliminate interfaith hostility and all the horror that ensues, and coexist in harmony, each celebrating the Creator according to our own traditions. First and most importantly, the Creator, the one life, is in its heaven here, right now. It is born anew in each new life form and needs no reincarnation nor eternal existence of each ego it exists as. We are all that eternal life, so we are eternal, even though our life forms and egos come and go. It is one life, not separate parts. There are no other deities or intercessors. It is the very life living within us, the living Creator, our most intimate, loving, greater self. The only angels and demons are people who behave in those ways. The only one we should be talking to and loving is the one manifesting us from within. That life is only human in us. It is not a person. It is the life in all things, and if you split a rock, it is there. We are the same in our spirit as it is our spirit. That is the same spirit in all life forms, so, yes, somehow, even a mushroom has a sense of humor. We fear loneliness and use it as a punishment because we are that eternally alone one life. Loneliness can drive us mad and to suicide. People die from loneliness. If we isolate a bee or termite, they die. So if you are living a life of denial in hopes of going to some better place after you die, You are only turning your back on heaven here. Heaven and hell are right here, depending on how you live. The dietary and moral laws of Moses are not intended to gain you access to heaven later. They are intended to keep you healthy, happy, and long-lived here. Your ego gets one shot at it. Your life is precious. Nourish it, love it, and enjoy it. All things in moderation, as Buddha taught. Gluttony, the overindulgence in anything, is the road to suffering, hell on earth, and a bad end. To maximize our own lives, we need to nourish and maximize the quality of the lives of our loved ones. We do this through marital fidelity and commitment to our loved ones, and the extension of that out into the community at large in our interactions with others. This is the way of all the religions. When we do this, avoiding excess, being kind, merciful, and forgiving, we live our best lives, and when we also love the one life within, we find the best of worlds, our heaven. Common decency and morality are the norm everywhere. Oppressing the human spirit beyond that, in the hopes of attaining some other heaven, is pointlessly oppressing the Creator in its heaven here. It gives us all song and dance and celebrations, and we should enjoy them. Men must be allowed to be men, and women must be allowed to be women, as the Creator has made them. In Western culture, men are being attacked for being male, and in some other cultures, women are oppressed. None of us should have to feel guilty or ashamed about how the Creator has made us. For instance, just as we do not cover a flower, saying it is evil to appreciate its beauty, or evil for it to display its beauty, it is thwarting the will of the Creator to hide in shame what it has wrought in women. Modesty does not require extremism. Likewise, the Creator made all females of all species, so they enjoy participating in the creation by bringing forth more life. Those who mutilate them, to deny them this pleasure, are thwarting the will of the Creator living through them, and denying the Creator that pleasure. I have studied all the major faiths and found them not too different on the essential levels. For instance, all the faiths can accept the wisdom in Moses' 10 Commandments. They are based on common human values. I do not attend a church or temple, as the Creator has been my constant, most intimate companion for over 50 years, and I do not follow a particular religion. I never say rote prayers. I just talk to the Creator like anyone else, but of course with a holy, reverent, loving spirit. I could be called a Buchris Hin Jumas, as I have taken something from each, but cannot claim to be any completely. For instance, I understand the reason behind all Mosaic dietary laws, but eat pork, as we know trichinosis is no longer a problem if the meat is cooked until it is well done. But I always avoid eating the fat, not just in pork, but in all of my meats. I also eat shellfish when I know they came from clean waters in proper seasons and have been kept fresh through refrigeration, something Moses didn't have. I don't worship communally because I am in constant conversation with the Creator. If I had to kneel or kowtow each time I placed my attention there, I would be unable to get on with my life. If I closed my eyes and bowed my head every time I spoke to the Creator, I would be walking into walls and traffic. When I am being most intimate, I roll my eyes upward and place my attention within. I'd be a hypocrite to do it any other way in church, mumbling rote prayers that mean mostly, "I hope you were there." However, I completely support community congregation and worship as it draws us all together and reassures us on our common values. The religions are good. They only need to adjust their view of the Creator. Not a human-type individual far away, but rather the very life within us, our most intimate self. There are no angels, demons, or devils. There is only the eternal Creator in its heaven in the here and now, the present moment. It is the one life. The Father in Christianity, Allah in Islam, Brahman in Hinduism, and the unnameable in Judaism. It is the deity Buddhism lacks. It is the one life, parent to us all. If we can adopt this understanding in all our faiths, we can finally be done with religious warfare and persecutions. In regards to Buddhism, I would note that the only reason attachments cause pain is because what we attach ourselves to is so good. It is foolish to deny oneself these attachments so we don't feel the loss of them later so deeply. Also, it is not possible to stop further incarnations of the Creator. That would place it in an unbearable eternal isolation in a void. Now let's examine Jesus. First, I would like to clarify two names. It is not Jesus Christ. It is Jesus the Christ, meaning Jesus the Anointed One. In his day, he was Jesus ben Joseph of Nazareth. It is also not Mary Magdalene, but Mary the Magdalene, as she was living in Magdala when Jesus met her. She was not a prostitute, but a wealthy young woman escaping the boredom of Bethany, where she lived with her brother Lazarus for the nightlife of Magdala, a port town with lots of nightlife and social activity. For all the faiths, I would note that God did not write our scriptures. Men did. They are based upon the history, wisdom, and inspirations of our ancestors. But God did not ban pork. Moses did, because he knew it carried trichinosis, and it was fatty, and he also banned fat. Moses had the advantage of 1,800 years of Egyptian observations and wisdom to draw upon, especially regarding diet in the pharaonic household. The scriptures are men's interpretations of what they believe God wants, but that God is often portrayed as distant in some heaven and human in form, far from the truth. We are created in the Creator's image, in spirit, not our bodies. As we are the Creator's children, it can be said that the authors were often divinely inspired, but often they were self-inspired and added things glorifying events to the level of mythology and supernatural miracles. For instance, in the Gospel of Mark, the earliest gospel, probably written by a companion of Peter about 65 to 70 CE, there is no virgin birth and no resurrection, just an empty tomb and women running away in fear. There are a lot of healings and casting out of demons, but healings are always miraculous, and there are no demons, just mental disease and, in one case in Mark, epilepsy. Certainly he wouldn't overlook things as significant as a virgin birth and resurrection. Matthew, 5 to 10 years later, copies Mark. Something common and not considered plagiarism in those days, but adds miracles and the birth narrative. About 5 to 10 years after Matthew, Luke also copies Mark and adds more of his own narrative and miracles. And much later, about 90 to 100 CE, John writes his own narrative, without copying Mark, Matthew, or Luke, and the entire tone becomes symbolic and theological, rather than narrative and chronological, and portrays Jesus as the divine Word. This is now a far cry from Mark, who probably actually knew Peter. Also, consider these implications of the miraculous birth narrative. Why would any sane man take a woman about to give birth and put her on a donkey to travel 90 dangerous miles to another town where they have no accommodations awaiting them? And why was Jesus later rejected by the people in his hometown of Nazareth? In those times, if a single woman gave birth, the child was an accepted member of the community in its entirety. It was not considered a bastard. But if the child was the result of any of the relationships forbidden by Moses, the child was considered a bastard and was shunned and excluded from the religious life of the community. Now, if Paul, the earliest writer, speaks of Jesus as born of a woman, born under the law, why did he add born under the law unless there was some question about that? If Jesus was not begotten and wholly divine, he had a human father. It stands to reason that if they did go to Bethlehem with her ready to give birth, it was to conceal the date of birth, because in a small town of 120 to 300 people, as Nazareth was, the women would know the baby was too large to be premature, which, according to the virgin birth narrative, It would be if not fathered by Joseph. It is also important to note that the Nazarenes were all interrelated, being descendants of the house of David, who settled there on their return from slavery in Babylon. Later, when they left Bethlehem and returned to Nazareth, Jesus might have borne a strong resemblance to a close male relative of Mary, leading the townsfolk to be suspicious about Jesus' paternity. I can think of no other reason for the big lie of the virgin birth showing up so late in the writings. Rather than proclaiming his human paternity, the later Gospels place uncertainty on the legitimacy of that paternity, and, as with Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, heroes grow taller over time, and fish get bigger with each telling. We see this clearly in the development of the writings from Paul through Mark and the other Gospels. Scripture is not always literal. If it were, there wouldn't be 3 different versions of Jesus' last words and other differences between the Gospels. A great example is the number 40. It is how long the Jews wandered in the desert, how long Jesus fasted in the wilderness, how long it rained on Noah, and on, over 150 times. Why? Because 40 does not literally mean 40. It simply means a long period of trial or tribulation. The primary flaw in Christianity is the Roman deification of Jesus, making him the same as the Creator, and the praying to him, and the saints in some sects. Asking for something in his name, as some sects do, is fine. For the first 325 years after Jesus, Christianity spread far and wide, and the implications of his teachings were widely debated. The most diverse opinions were over how, exactly, was Jesus divine. Was he partly divine, or wholly divine, or not divine at all, just wholly human? Was he created by the Creator, and so subordinate to the Creator? Or was he begotten by the Creator, and therefore one and the same as the Creator? To understand the real teachings of Jesus, we must first strip away the layers of mythology added later, not out of malice, but out of politics, fear, and power. Jesus was born a Jew. He lived and taught as a Jewish rabbi, immersed in Hebrew Scripture, speaking Aramaic to Galilean crowds. In his world, God was not distant or abstract. God was Abba, a near, intimate presence. His teachings were not about worshiping Jesus. They were about realizing your own nearness to the divine. He was the first Reformed Jew, teaching that the Mosaic blood sacrifices were not needed, just repentance, and teaching mercy and forgiveness of sin rather than stonings. But he didn't preach against the other rituals and aspects of Judaism. He followed kosher law and told others, like the lepers, to obey the temple law and slaves to obey their masters. Yet within a few centuries, this man was turned into a Roman-style god, a divine being born of a virgin, ruler of the cosmos, consubstantial with the Creator. This shift didn't come from the followers of Jesus in Jerusalem. It came from Rome. To understand Jesus not as a figure of worship, but as a fellow human being, we return to the earliest source we have, the Gospel of Mark. Mark gives us no nativity story, no magi, no guiding star, no virgin birth, no Bethlehem. His Jesus arrives as an adult, baptized by John, and immediately begins calling people to change their lives. This is not the Jesus of doctrine. This is a man among men. Mark's Jesus performs healings, speaks in riddles, and is often misunderstood, even by his closest followers. He's not preaching about himself. He's calling people to wake up to something within themselves. And when he returns to his hometown in Nazareth, he is rejected. Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, they ask? Not because they are amazed by a divine origin, but because he seems too familiar to be special. If we strip away the supernatural layers and focus on what Jesus taught and how he lived, we see a message not of divine authority, but of radical empowerment. A message of our own divine origin. Why the change? Because in 325 CE, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea to resolve the Arian issue. Arius, a bishop, was teaching that Jesus was wholly human, and Constantine wanted unity in what was then a fractious empire, and he needed a god who could unify the masses. Romans deified emperors. Now an emperor would deify Jesus. The resultant Roman Christianity, with its turn-the-other-cheek and acceptance of suffering approach, was the perfect religion for an oppressive emperor. Constantine didn't just call the council, he oversaw it. He paid the bishops' expenses, opened the meetings, and made it clear that disunity would not be tolerated. While he was not a theologian, he was a ruler, and his goal was political peace, not doctrinal nuance. Bishops who resisted the resulting creed were exiled. Dissent was not debated, it was removed. At Nicaea, the human teacher became the divine king. Not the liberator of the soul, but the object of worship. And with that shift, the Church became the new empire, replacing Caesars with popes, temples with cathedrals, and a living message with a static creed. The message of Jesus, that we could all be like him, and even better, was erased, as now he was a god, and no one else could hope to become like him. In the years that followed, those who held to alternative teachings, Arians, Gnostic groups, early Jewish Christians, and others, were declared heretics. Their sacred writings were burned. Their communities were hunted, scattered, or destroyed. What could not be absorbed into the official narrative was erased from history. Heresy was punished with death. This was not a philosophical debate. It was an imperial purge. The diversity of early Christianity was replaced with uniformity, enforced by Roman law and the sword. Now that we've cleared away the institutional layers, let's listen again to the words of Jesus, not as scripture recited in stained glass, but as teaching spoken by a man to his friends, neighbors, and challengers. Jesus' message wasn't that he alone was divine. It was that we all are, that we are each children of the Creator, and because of that, we carry the divine consciousness within us. He said, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. And knock, and the door will be open to you." These aren't empty spiritual platitudes. They are instructions. They are quantum mechanics in ancient language. My quantum tales prove them. The kingdom of God, he said, is not coming with signs to be observed. The kingdom of God is within you, or, in another interpretation, in your midst. Not above you, not in temples or empires, but within. He saw heaven not as a destination, but a state of being, a state unlocked by awareness, by love, by transformation. Heaven in his teaching is not a distant place, but a spiritual reality present here and now, realized when the divine will and human consciousness align. He never asked for worship. He asked for action. Love your neighbor, forgive your enemies, be as the Creator is, merciful, generous, whole. And perhaps most radical of all, he invited us to become like him. Not to revere him as unreachable, but to walk with him on his path. He said, "The works I do, you shall do also, and greater." And he did not place himself above others. He said, "I am among you as one who serves." And in humility, he said, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." This was not false modesty. It was a radical redefinition of leadership and spiritual identity. That is not the voice of a demigod. That is the voice of a teacher, a brother, a mirror. Jesus said to do what he did. He said to love the Creator with all your heart. If you are worshiping Jesus, you are not following him and loving the one he said to love. You have replaced that one with him. which he would find abhorrent. Constantine made a god of the man and buried the message he gave, that we are all the Creator's children, wholly human, yet partly divine. So what does this all mean for us, right here, right now? If time is the engine of the universe, and life is the observer that causes the wave function to collapse into form, then we are not passive passengers. We are participants in creation. This is the core realization of time dilation cosmology, that the universe is not something that happens to us, but something that happens through us. Jesus told us the kingdom of God is within. He told us to ask, to seek, to knock, because he knew that the door is not locked from the outside. It opens from within. What we call miracles were not displays of supernatural power. They were demonstrations of alignment with the deeper structure of reality. Healing came through faith. Food multiplied through the power of compassion and shared action. Storms calmed, not by force, but by presence, as per my paper Demystifying the Bible, referenced in Time Dilation Cosmology 4. This is what we see in the quantum tales, a world evolving around us, for us. As it is so crucial to Christianity, let's take a moment to talk about the empty tomb. It is the center of much theological speculation, but here's what's striking. None of the Gospels describe what actually happened inside the tomb. No account depicts Jesus rising. Instead, we find stories of women arriving after the fact, the stone rolled away, the tomb empty, a messenger saying, "He is not here." In the earliest Gospel, Mark, there are no resurrection appearances at all in the original text, only fear and silence. Later Gospels add more. Matthew shows Jesus meeting the women. Luke has him walking with disciples. John includes detailed conversations and physical contact. But all these are added layers, literary and theological expansions. What happened in the tomb remains untold, and perhaps unknowable. And that silence, that gap, may be the most honest part of the story. It is not a spectacle, but a mystery. It invites not belief in a miracle, but contemplation of a transformation. Did the Creator transform the body of Jesus into light so it wouldn't decay? Is this why there is the Shroud of Turin? That remains a mystery, though we are all manifestations of sparks of light, electrons and quarks, and we know they often just jump in and out of being. For instance, when an electron changes orbital shells, it doesn't move from one to the other across the space separating the shells. It is either in one or the other. It disappears from one and shows up in the other. Quarks also pop in and out of being. So it seems to be a logical possibility that since the Creator is constantly manifesting all of us out of what are often transitory sparks of light, it could also easily achieve such a transformation. The Creator obviously loved Jesus dearly to keep his name alive for so long, and in such good ways, with so many people doing good works in his name. As I note in Time Dilation Cosmology 4, the effects of faith are logical quantum possibilities due to our divine origin. He was human. He struggled. He feared death. And in the garden, facing the cross, he did not radiate calm. He sweated blood in agony and cried out to be spared, and berated his disciples for not staying awake to comfort him. That is not a demigod. That is a man confronting suffering, just like us. And yet, he changed the world, not by becoming a god, but by showing us what it means to be fully human, fully alive, fully present in the one life within us all. I would also note that Judas did not betray Jesus. Jesus decided to turn himself in. For what reason, we do not know. But as they were finishing their meal, Jesus wasn't revealing a secret when he said one of them would betray him that night. He was telling them he wanted that. Peter refused outright, and Jesus told them the one he fed the sop to would do it, and fed it to Judas, who must have been sitting next to him. He even told Judas where and when to bring the palace guard. Judas didn't do it for the silver. He did it for his master Jesus. When he realized Jesus was doomed, he threw the silver back at the priests and hung himself in grief, not guilt. When Judas left the room, Jesus said he would wish he had never been born. I think this was a despicable thing for him to do to Judas. He could just as easily have just walked into the temple to turn himself in. Why Jesus turned himself in is the mystery. If Mark's words, which are the most reliable, are correct, and the last words of Jesus were, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" then it seems obvious things did not turn out as Jesus had expected. We need to consider that Jesus had become a celebrity. He couldn't enter the towns and villages anymore without being swarmed by people, wanting to touch him to be healed. He was also wanted by the temple guards. When he announced he wanted to be turned in, no one asks, why? Not even Judas questions him on this. So it seems they all sort of saw this coming to a head. It could be Jesus thought he'd survive, as the priests couldn't kill him under Roman law, and he hadn't broken any Roman laws. Indeed, Pilate found no fault with him and only had him put to death for the sake of the priests. Another name correction is needed here. It is not Barabbas, but rather Bar-Abbas, meaning son of Abbas. I should also clarify why the Hebrews chose Bar-Abbas over Jesus. Bar-Abbas was a Hebrew freedom fighter, what would be a terrorist to the Romans. He killed a Roman soldier and was a hero to the Jews, not a murderer. When the Hebrews chose him to be set free, they chose the way of the sword over the turn the other cheek, render unto Caesar path of Jesus. Jesus had been trying to turn them from this path of rebellion and violence, hence his warning of the temple being reduced to rubble, which it was just 40 years after his death. To think our most intimate, most loving Creator requires blood sacrifice of any sort is horrible. The Creator stopped Abraham from slaughtering his son Isaac. There was no human sacrifice in Judaism. Why would such a loving Creator then butcher anyone, much less what is supposedly its only child, so our puny sins could be forgiven by that very same Creator? How does that even make a shred of sense? How barbaric and pagan it all is. Torturous human blood sacrifice. How disgusting to be washed in the blood of the Lamb and to ritually cannibalize him. This has nothing to do with the loving Creator within us all. It is the gory, bloody imaginings of a brutal, pagan culture, just like Moses' blood sacrifices and offerings, and blood being splashed on the altar, etc. The Creator did not slaughter Jesus so our sins would be forgiven. Jesus got himself killed while showing us a less bloody way than Moses. Repentance instead of sacrifice. Forgiveness and mercy instead of brutal punishments and death. Jesus, as a man, had human failings. Knowing what I know how powerful what he saw was. He certainly exhibited a touch of megalomania, despite his humility. If he said the bread and wine at the Last Supper were his body and blood, he meant it as though he were speaking for the Creator, whose life forms have to consume each other's biomass to survive. In that regard, they are all of our bodies and blood, for we are all one life. He only wanted to be remembered when we eat, which is often. The same structure Jesus spoke of is visible now through quantum theory, biological unity, and time dilation physics. Every insight we've explored so far leads to this truth. The Creator is not above or beyond. The Creator is within. And not just within Jesus, within you. The one life peers out through your eyes, feels through your heart, shapes reality through your intention. You are not an echo of the divine. You are its active voice. This is not mysticism. This is physics. This is what happens when the science of time meets the wisdom of the soul. Let's talk now about faith, not as belief in dogma, but as the interface between consciousness and the cosmos. In a quantum universe, faith isn't about superstition. It's about expectation. It's about intention shaping probability. It's about awareness determining outcomes. I told you a few stories, small ones. Quantum tales from everyday life. A lesson in faith in Jakarta. A red marble appearing on a beach. A little girl walking a beach looking for red sea glass. A stranger's faith yields treasure. A bag of caramel corn that was supposed to be out of reach, and somehow wasn't. A pink rose in a book appears on glass. A woman's fatherly treasure. A Japan playing hide and seek. These aren't magic tricks. They're echoes of something deeper. They are micro-manifestations, tiny proofs that the universe bends toward intention, especially when offered with clarity, humility, and joy. Jesus didn't use the word quantum, but he described the same principle. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. According to your faith, let it be done to you. Faith is not wishful thinking. It is the tuning of your being to the frequency of possibility. It's the collapse of the wave function through love, focus, and surrender. The universe listens to what you expect, and it answers through time. For instance, my midlife crisis was an unfaithful wife who spent us into bankruptcy and divorced me. I lost everything I had earned in my 27 years at sea. I even lost my dogs. You'll have to read my memoirs to get the grisly details. In 2003, I ended up in a tent in our subtropical rainforest in the middle of winter with my dog and cat, Mr. Ted E. Bear and Mr. Kit E. Cat. The first month I ended up with just the change in my pocket and my car. I had gone broke and stayed in a free campground for a month, but couldn't stay longer. However, there were mushroom pickers in the campground, and they inspired me to go looking for blackies. I did find a few, but not enough to sell, so I gave them away. But what I did find was a fantastic hidden campsite in the forest with a stream, and I stayed there for another 5 months, gathering dry driftwood on the beaches for firewood. I don't blame the Creator for my woes. It actually warned me the night before I married her, and I would have canceled the wedding if I didn't think everyone would commit me. People are each other's woes. We all have free will, so the Creator is not to blame. My frame of mind was thankful for the great campsite. One starry night, I asked the Creator for just one thing, to be justified in the eyes of my children. When I was finally made to leave by a game warden who found me, I moved to a coastal park campground I could afford, then found an old RV I could afford and ended up in a commercial RV park, and then, one day, I took a recuperating friend on a walk to regain her strength at our glass beach. I started selling my sea glass jewelry at the beach, and 3 years later, I had an indoor store, and a year later, the beginning of my museum. When I stopped collecting after 10 years, I had a veritable treasure and a fresh inspiration about gravity that sent me back to school and my time dilation cosmology model. I am now a published cosmologist and theologian, and I am certainly justified in the eyes of my children. If you want to be a baker, learn how to bake, and the next step will appear, and then the next and next. When I began my sea glass business, I was on a pension and had 2 daughters in college, and just wanted a little money to play golf. That was 20 years ago, and I have never gotten to that golf game. The next step just kept appearing. We've traveled a long arc, from the edge of the universe to the ancient hills of Nazareth, from the architecture of space-time to the teachings of a man who sacrificed himself to awaken us to our divinity and the Creator's love and mercy. And what have we found? That we are not accidents of matter, not isolated sparks drifting through cold darkness. We are co-authors of reality itself. Life is not a side effect of the universe. Life is the reason it exists. The one life, the Creator, is not far from you. It is the very life within you. It breathes through your breath. It sees through your eyes. It shapes the unfolding of time through your every intention. And now we come to the synthesis. What do we do with what we've seen? First, we reclaim Jesus, not the imperial deity invented by emperors and theologians, but the humble teacher who said, "I am among you as one who serves." The man who invited us not to kneel before him, but to walk beside him. He was never meant to be unreachable. His message was not about building cathedrals, but about living in awareness, love, and power. It was a message of direct access, no intermediaries, no hierarchy. And second, we reclaim ourselves. Time dilation cosmology recenters us not as accidents of matter, but as co-authors of reality. Consciousness isn't a byproduct of brain chemistry. It's the source code of the universe. It is you, your awareness, your intention, that shapes the unfolding of time. You are not waiting for a kingdom to descend. You are carrying it. You are not calling out to a distant God. You are a living expression of the Creator's presence right here, right now. And the final truth? The universe is not closed. It is listening, waiting. Jesus noted that the Creator seeds prolifically, but only a few seeds find good soil. The islands surrounding my sea glass beach are the seagull rookery. In the spring, I loved watching the baby birds and parents, but the vast majority of the baby gulls don't survive. They end up starving to death because they can't figure out they need to seek beyond their parents for the food that surrounds them. In humans, this is also true of our spiritual nourishment. Few seek, few ask, and few prosper spiritually in the magical garden they are surrounded by. And so I leave you with the simplest and greatest invitation ever given. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. Because the door opens from within.